Number 1. The Tells Doll. A man came home from work with a gift for his son. He had picked up a new video game for him, Sonic R. It was a racing game, and when he gave his son the gift, he was so excited he played it right away. That night, he played the game with his son, and they had a great time. A couple of days later, the boy was almost finished with the game. His dad was there in his room when he beat the last boss, and he roared in excitement when he finally did. He smiled and asked him how he liked the game as he watched the credits screen. "What's that?" he asked the boy when the doll appeared on the screen. The boy said it was the Tails doll. That was all he knew. He told his son it was time for bed. Later, during the night, the curious father went to the boy's room and turned on the TV very quietly to play the game for a while. He noticed that he now had the option to play as Tails doll. He chose him to tag up with some of the game. The game was fun until he tagged him up with Sonic. The screen went black when the game system shut itself down. The man decided it was time for him to go to sleep since he had to work in the morning, so he crept out of his son's room and went to lay in bed with his wife. At around 2 a.m., he woke up when he heard some thumps on the door. He assumed it was his son getting up to ask him to get him something. He told the boy to stop and go back to bed. The thumping kept happening as at one point he noticed a little shadow coming from under the door. Tails kept popping up in his head. He got out of bed and slowly opened the door. Then he heard someone say this very softly, "You are coming with me forever." It was a doll. An evil, blood-covered, possessed little doll. It was the doll from the game. It had to be. Number 2. The Rose of Dread Mother. I was 12 years old when I met my mother. We just moved into a new neighborhood. Autumn leaves began to dribble as my dad started to unpack our things. My brother, who was 4 at the time, was playing with his imaginary friend, who he supposedly just met when we moved in. My brother invited me to play with her, telling me that his friend wanted to introduce herself. Thinking it was absurd for him to have an imaginary friend, I objected to his offer. "Fine, I'll tell her to meet you herself," said my brother. My brother had always avoided talking to other girls since her mother passed away, so I thought it was natural for him to have sort of a motherly figure, or perhaps even a friend. Later that night, however, I had the first encounter. I was sitting in a boat in the middle of a rather foggy lake. I could still feel the wind touching my ears. Is this real? Might this be a dream? So I took a glimpse of my surroundings. I saw a small wooden cabin with its door opened, and I noticed that the lake was surrounded by trees, making me unable to see what was beyond it. But that's when I saw it. A beautiful, doll-like figure wearing a humongous white gown, like the ones you see in fancy British parties. She had a red crimson hair as if she dyed herself with blood. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. It's as if she would slaughter me if I blinked for just a moment. Before I knew it, her bright black eyes were staring back at me, giving me a chill down my spine. She opened up a humongous, horrifying smile, impossible for any normal human. Her mouth was pitch black, and I couldn't even see her teeth. Her glare was so full of bloodlust, I could feel it just by looking at her. She chuckled, laughed for a bit, then let out a dark, psychotic laugh. She let her gown open and reveal my brother's mutilated head, as well as many others just swinging as if attached to a string. "Now it's your turn, Danny." My sanity was being tested. I was about to go mad. An hour in this place and I would have gone into a psychotic tantrum. But I didn't. I just stood there, somehow feeling very calm about the situation, thinking that it's all just a dream. Then the sound of my alarm rang across the room. I was sweating all over my body, catching only glimpses of what had happened last night. Fear, insanity, distraught, and sadness I experienced in a glimpse. Never in my early days have I felt something so dread and so full of hate. I could only imagine what dreams I had last night. So I went downstairs for breakfast and began forgetting the matter. "Did you meet her?" said my brother. I had forgotten what had happened last night, so I chuckled for a moment and said, "Met who?" "The pretty lady in the gown, silly. I told you she'd meet you." Expressionless, I began to remember what happened last night. Then I screamed at the top of my lungs as if it happened right before me. How could he possibly have known about the dream? I over-panicked the situation and my asthma began to take over. I didn't have my inhaler back then. Unable to breathe, I saw a blurry vision of what seemed to be the woman suffocating me while staring at me with her wide, black eyes. The next thing I know, I was in the hospital bed. "Daddy, are you alright?" "It's okay, you're in safe hands now. Daddy's going to go to work, so be on your best behavior," said my dad in a comforting manner. I was speechless. I left a blank expression as my father left the room. Before I knew it, I was alone. Wait, no, it didn't feel right. Something is inside the room beside me. Something with dark, malicious intent. And I began to notice the various corners of the room were dark, but one was even darker. It was pure black, blacker than that of the blackest sky. The more I stared at it, the brighter the other corners seemed. Then she appeared right above me. Her crimson red hair was swinging as I began to lose my sanity, all the while funneling my hair as if I was hers to own. I didn't want to even look at her face, even if it meant my death. Then she just stopped. The room didn't seem so dark anymore. It's as if she lost interest in me. I checked my surroundings over and over and over again until I realized that she wasn't here anymore. I began crying hysterically until I fell asleep. In my dream, I was in the lake again, but this time it was still. The place was so silent that I could hear my own heartbeat. The fog began to thicken. I knew that it wasn't over yet. She wanted me. She wanted my head. Nothing's going to stop it. Before I knew it, she was right in front of me. She gave me a blank expression as if she was waiting for a response. I felt like if I gave the wrong answer, she would kill me on the spot. However, I knew I was going to die either way, but I didn't care. I looked at her, smiled, and then said, "Insanity must have a pretty thing to have." She smiled back at me, but this time it wasn't a horrifying psychotic smile, but rather a warm, gentle smile. "Aye, it sure is," she said. Gently, she inserted a bright red rose as beautiful as her into my palm. "I bid you farewell. May this be a reminder to you that for what reason you choose to come here again, I will welcome you as one of my children, and I will protect you even at the cost of my life." I woke up the next day as if the whole situation had never happened. I also noticed that the rose was still in my palm. I looked at the window and smiled at the view. Insanity is a precious thing. Right, Mother? Number 3. Never again. I was 17 when she came. I've been living with my abusive mother for 17 long, painful years. It was around midnight and my mother was already asleep, so when the 3 soft raps at the front door came, it was me who answered. An odd-looking little girl stood there, with cheeks pale and colorless, blonde hair and braided pigtails, pink dress torn a little at the hem, bare feet, and turning slightly blue from the cold of winter, and black eyes. Phantomless, deep black eyes. I quickly let her in, thinking of how horribly unaddressed she was. It wasn't until later I wondered why she'd not been shivering, or even questioned as to why she was there in the first place. I got her into the living room, wrapping her little form in a thick afghan my grandmother knitted. She held it, though it didn't seem to affect her, and I smiled. "What's your name, sweetie?" A long silence passed, in which she stared at me. I was beginning to be discomforted by her black gaze when she parted her lips and spoke in a small voice. "Lacey Morgan." I smiled and nodded. "You can stay here tonight, Lacey," I said, motioning to the couch. She curled up in a little ball, black eyes still on me, and I exited the room. That night I slept soundly, not worrying about my mother beating me or the strange little girl on my couch. When morning came and I trudged into the kitchen, I was greeted with a coffee mug to the shoulder. I gave a feeble shout of pain, staring at my mother. "What the hell did you do? Why is there dirt on the couch?" she shouted, confusing me greatly. Upon investigating, I found that Lacey had vanished, the only proof she had been there being some dirt that must have fallen off her dress or feet. I took responsibility, earning myself a strong hit to my cheek, and left for school. While there, I heard something that sent chills down my spine. Lacey Morgan was found dead last night. I passed the day waiting for any more news on the subject, but found none. Upon arriving home, the news was broadcasting a live report on her, though. Lacey Morgan, 6 years of age, was reported dead at 7 last night. Her body was located in the backyard, buried there in her pink dress. So far, there has been no sign of her mother, Marissa Morgan, who is suspected to be the killer. Marissa was reportedly abused Lacey multiple times and may be responsible for her death. Suddenly, a picture of Lacey appeared on the screen. She appeared very close to how she had when I met her. Blonde hair and braids, pink dress, pale face. Only her cheeks had color, and her eyes were baby blue. To most, this would seem unimportant, but to me it was. She died before arriving at my house, if that's what the newscaster said was true. Died hours before. I tried to play it off, going about my business. When I went to bed early, so as not to see my mother. It was around midnight when I woke to cool fingers stroking the bruise on my cheek. I sighed, leaning into a small hand. "Never again," Lacey whispered, before her hand vanished. Not 10 minutes later, I heard my mother screaming. I rushed into her bedroom, nearly fainting at what I saw. My mom was thrashing wildly on her bed, a small creature having buried its face into her chest. I could almost hear the sound of flesh tearing, and my mother's screaming increased in volume. I wished I hadn't gotten up. Later on, I told myself I hadn't, but I had. So when Lacey pulled back from the gaping hole in my mother's chest cavity, I saw in plain view her razor-sharp teeth glinting in the light, glinting with my mother's blood. She smiled innocently at me for a moment before swiftly tearing out my mother's jugular. That time I did faint. When I came to, I was in my bed. I walked to my mother's room, morbid curiosity getting the best of me. Upon opening the door, I found the room empty. The bed had been neatly made, as if my mom had left for work early. The only oddities were the dirty child's footprints in the open window, showing that Lacey had, in fact, visited. I never saw my mother again, and I never missed her either. I eventually got married, and we had a child together. I named her Lacey. Recently, I noticed the neighbor's daughter had all sorts of scrapes and bruises on her arms. I've started watching their home, and the other day I saw something odd. A little girl running barefoot through their backyard up to their back door. It was around midnight, so I couldn't be for sure, but I thought she met my eyes with her black ones, and I could swear she mouthed 2 words at me. Never again.